All right, let's go right in. Okay, so we're here to talk about nutrition, calories, diets, macros, all of these terms that we hear in social media. We hear it on the news. We hear it here in the gym. We hear it with our friends. We're going to dive into each of these and what they even mean and how they affect us. So one, I don't want this to be me talking at you. So whatever questions you have, please interact and please ask questions. So let's just dive into nutrition to start with. Nutrition really by definition is just the process of providing or obtaining the nutrients that we need for health and growth. Everything we eat either contributes to our health or contributes to sickness. So I feel like before we get started, I hear a lot of nutrition coaches, especially these days, that promote that every food is healthy. And I feel like I would be doing a disservice if I stood up here and told you that every food is healthy. Now, you can definitely eat some ultra-processed foods and still lose weight and still be healthy. It's just a matter of how often you do it. It's also a matter of what your goals are overall. Diet. What do you think of when you hear the word diet? Just curious.
Two things. I think of fad diets, but I also think of general what you put in your mouth.
Okay, perfect. And that's exactly what a diet is. It's just what you put in your mouth every day. But I do think that it gets some negative connotations, especially in the media. We always have some kind of new fad diet that the celebrities are following or that someone's following and losing weight. But diet is really just what we put in our mouth every day. So each and every one of us is on a diet. Which that leads me into calories. And we all hear the term calories all the time because that is the measurement of the energy that we obtain from our food. But I think the way that we know it, and you tell me if you think differently, but we feel like we have to cut calories to lose weight, which to a certain degree that is very true. But there are times when we can cut calories too much and it affects us negatively. So it's important that we remember that it is a measurement of the energy that we're obtaining from the food we're putting in our body. And we all need energy, right? On a regular basis. Okay, let's go into, macronutrients. This term, I think that we have all heard tons over the last 10 years. Any thoughts on macronutrients before we dive into it? Like any associations with that word?
My only association is keto.
Keto.
That's where I hear it most, is people talking about keto.
Okay. Yes. Yeah, I think we hear a lot of macronutrients. Like I got to weigh and measure and track my macronutrients. I got to track my food. Macronutrients, though, really are just 3 nutrients that, for the most part, make up our food. So there's protein, there's carbs, and there are fats. All 3 of those are macronutrients, and they each have a unique function in our body. So each one of them is important. So like keto diet, and there's other diets like that, they're eliminating one of those nutrients. So keto is actually a very low protein, no carbohydrate diet, or very minimal carbohydrates, which can work for weight loss if that's what you're shooting for, but it's not necessarily the healthiest way to do it. Because when you stop doing it, just like all other fad diets, the shakes, the shots, any kind of fad diet, it's essentially dropping calories and you lose weight, but it's not necessarily the healthiest thing to do for your body. So we're going to talk deeper about each of these nutrients and how to really obtain each of those for health and longevity. Okay, so let's dive deeper into protein. So first of all, like I said, all 3 nutrients have a unique function in your body, and all 3 of those nutrients, when obtained the right way, give you the right amount of calories because they all equal out to a certain amount of calories. So your protein is 4 calories per gram of protein. So if you eat 20 grams of protein, you're getting 80 calories out of that. So throughout the day, as you eat those nutrients, it adds up to your calorie intake. Ultimately, we need about a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So if we weigh 100 pounds, we need 100 grams of protein in a day. This is really important because protein is the building block of our muscles. It's also an essential nutrient. So what that means is that your body does not make that. You have to ingest it from eating protein. And then the body breaks down proteins into amino acids and peptides. Again, very important for maintaining and growing muscle mass. So as we age, we tend to lose muscle mass if we are not eating enough protein and we're not lifting weights. So if you're in the gym following Chris's programming, you're lifting weights, so you got that checked off. Now it's time to just make sure we're getting enough protein to maintain the results or to obtain the results that you're looking for in the gym. Any questions on protein so far? All right, let's talk about ways to take in proteins. So, sorry, this thing is a lot more touchy than I'm used to. Protein comes from a couple different sources. So we have our animal proteins, which is what I recommend. And then you can certainly do vegetarian sources as well. But I think either way, it doesn't matter if it's vegetarian or it is an animal protein. What matters is quality. So getting it from a quality source. So if you're eating animal proteins, I think it's important to remember that whatever that animal is eating is what you are eating. So I personally promote local grass-fed, and that's what I try to buy as often as possible, which I also realize it's hard to come by sometimes. So when that's the case, I'll go with organic. Organic doesn't mean that it's grass-fed. It's most likely grain-fed, but the grains are organic, so that's a second best option. And then you have your other packaged meats. But again, it's just, yes, Evan?
What is organic?
Organic means that it is not covered in pesticides and it is not genetically modified.
Where here can you find local grass-fed?
Great question. So a couple options. Butcher's Box is a great place where you can order and have it shipped to you. I typically buy from a place that's called Farm Fresh Stand, and it's close to Ball Ground. So it is a little bit of a drive, but it's well worth it to go and stock up on meats.
What's it called?
Farm Fresh.
Farm Fresh.
I think it's Farm Fresh Beef, if I'm not mistaken. But they buy all of their meats from a farm in Jasper. So it's local and we know exactly where it's coming from. But that's my number one recommendation for protein. If you are looking for vegetarian sources, there's definitely ways to do that. The only thing is it becomes hard to balance your nutrients without getting too many carbohydrates. So for instance, if you're using, let's just say beans, 2 cups of beans are approximately 30 grams of protein, but you're also getting 80 grams of carbohydrates. So if you were to eat enough protein from beans to get what you need on a daily basis, your carbohydrates are probably going to be way too high. So that's going to be it's going to be a little out of balance. You could definitely use some other sources. So a lot of times to make it work, people that are getting enough protein from vegetarian sources, they're using some type of supplement, like a pea protein powder possibly. I know we carry one that looks pretty clean. So there's nothing wrong with vegetarian at all. You can get your protein in from that. It's just a matter of making sure you balance everything out. So like tempeh is a soy product. Same thing, soy, you want to make sure you're getting a quality source of soy because it is one of the most highly genetically modified crops. So you want to make sure you're using organic. In my opinion, if health is your goal. But again, you're getting 20 grams of protein from about 4 ounces of tempeh. And then that would also have 30 grams of carbs. So you can see where those sources really weigh heavier in carbs than they do protein. And that's kind of why, yes.
One more. So you have in there high quality deli meats. With all the sodium and stuff in the deli meats, where can we find the piece of meat?
So if I ever buy deli meat, I buy Applegate, which I find is a good source. But yes, deli meats are highly processed as well. So I tend to stay away from those as much as possible. And then also you'll see protein powders and bars I put last on the list also. And those are last for a reason as well. Again, you can get some good quality sources. I think what we carry is definitely a good quality source. And then there's another SFH, which is a grass-fed whey. That's a great quality source if you want to use a protein powder. Most protein bars are honestly like candy bars. If you read that ingredient list, which we'll get to in a little bit about ultra processed foods, you might recognize those first couple ingredients, and then the last 20, you're like, what is this? Probably not edible if you were to try to eat it by itself. All right, any other questions on proteins before we continue on?
What about eggs?
Oh, eggs are a great source. Great question. Eggs, you actually get about 7 grams of protein and 7 grams of fat. So it's another one of those foods that are kind of a little bit of both. I eat a high fat diet, but it's not necessarily what I recommend for all clients. It depends on what the goals are. But yes, you could eat, I recommend getting at least 1 egg yolk in there and then maybe mix some egg whites in with it to get your protein to hit that number. Any other questions on protein?
What about the egg whites that you buy?
Yeah, I would just always pay attention to that ingredient label, but yes, you could do carton egg whites. Again, just pay attention to where the source is and where they're coming from. Great questions. Anything else? Nothing yet? All right. Okay, so let's go on to fats. Fats are extremely important in your diet. If you are my age, you probably remember back in like the late 90s, early 2000s, where the no-fat diet was like all the craze. So you started seeing everything in the grocery store that was low fat, no fat. And we still see a lot of those things today. But you need fat in your diet. It is another essential nutrient that our body does not produce fatty acids. So we have to eat fat for a lot of different reasons and a lot of different functions in our body. It's also important to remember that typically when you see those low fat, no fat items, they are taking the fat out, but they're putting something else in, typically like an artificial sugar or something like that, to replace the flavor they're removing from the fat. Fat is used in our body as an energy source. It's also essential for hormone production, so huge reason why we don't want to cut fats out. It's also essential for brain function. Your formation of your cell membrane, so your cellular health, is affected by fats as well, and nervous system support. So there's a lot that goes on in the body that is reliant on fats. Also important to get a great healthy source when you are taking these in. Just like protein, fats, carbohydrates, all of them, you want to try to get different varieties in your diet. So you wouldn't want all of your fat to come from one source. You want to try to mix in different sources throughout the day. All right, let's talk about some different sources to get fats from. There's quite a few different ways. Oh, I don't think I mentioned fat. You get 9 calories per gram. So it is a little more dense. Your serving size looks smaller, but you're still getting just as many calories. So if you eat 10 grams of fat, you're getting 90 grams of calories. Or 90 calories, sorry. So quite a few different sources. One, animal products. So if you're getting fatty beefs, those tend to be high in fat. So for instance, like grass-fed beef, like ground beef, typically has about 20 plus grams of fat in 4 ounces. So you may want to just limit that in your diet or reduce the amount you're taking in. Pork also, it really depends on the cuts of the meat. Full fat dairy products, another way to get fat in. Some of your other great sources are going to be like nuts and seeds, avocado oil, olives, avocados, nut butters, which are great to add in with a snack. You just want to make sure when you're buying a nut butter that it doesn't have other added ingredients like different oils and sugars added into it. You want it to just be almonds or cashews or even peanuts if you're using peanut butter. Chia seeds, fish is another great source. So like salmon, sardines have a lot of healthy fats in those. And then again, going back to the eggs, if you're adding eggs into your diet, which I do recommend as a great protein and fat source. Questions on fats?
What's a good cheese?
Good cheese. Again, something that's just not highly processed. I wouldn't buy like what is it? So like Velveeta, it's not a cheese. Buy something out of the dairy section and I would just look at the ingredients and just make sure there's not a lot of other added ingredients. Again, I try to use organic as often as possible because my number one goal is to just feel really good and to be healthy. So I tend to go towards organic because we're going to be exposed to much less toxins that way. Any other questions? So main thing is do not eliminate fat out of your diet. All right, carbohydrates. I've got some bad news and some good news on carbohydrates. It is not an essential nutrient. You can live without carbohydrates. You should not live without carbohydrates, though. This is the good news. Your body's number one choice as an energy source is carbohydrates. But the body will survive without them. Carbohydrates, as far as the calories, same as protein, you get 4 calories per gram of carbohydrates. So same thing if you were to eat 20 grams of carbohydrates, you get 80 calories out of that. The one thing with carbohydrates, I think that's kind of like the fun food. Most of us love carbohydrates, and we find it in a lot of foods. The 2 of your best sources for carbohydrates, definitely fruits and your vegetables. The great thing about that is you actually get micronutrients from those sources, which are important for other functions in the body as well. So your micronutrients are like your vitamins and your minerals. So you definitely want those. Some other great healthy sources of carbohydrates. Potatoes is a great source. It's starchy, so you get a fair amount of carbohydrates from that. Oats, whole grain breads, beans, quinoa, rice, pasta, all of those are great sources of carbohydrates, healthy sources. Any questions on those? Yes.
Any pastas better than others? Any more recommend?
Yes, I actually just would need to do a little more research on which pastas, but again, I would go back to the ingredient label and make sure you recognize the ingredients in the pasta.
Would you, based on your knowledge and expertise, would you recommend a wheat pasta or the chickpea?
I think either one would be fine as long as there's not a lot of other preservatives in there with it. But yes, the chickpea, you probably get a little more protein in that pasta, so I would probably lean that direction. But there's nothing wrong with a wheat pasta either.
And if you have a gluten intolerance or sensitive to gluten?
You definitely need to go gluten-free. Yes. And a lot of people do have intolerances to gluten and we don't realize it. So, if you're having any strange digestive issues, it may be something that we want to look at taking out for a period of time. Great question. All right. Let's talk about, we talked about lots of healthy sources, but I feel like we have to address processed versus ultra processed foods because let's be realistic, we are going to come in contact with packaged items, and it's really about what you're doing the majority of the time and consistently that really matters. Obviously for health, you want to eat, yes.
Sorry, I want to go back to carbs for a second.
Sure.
I've been hearing recently that potatoes and rice, those kinds of starches, if you cool them down and like overnight and eat them the next day, it lowers the glycemic index. Can you explain what good that does, if any?
Well, glycemic index is really like the measurement of how fast a food is spiking our blood sugar. So if you're
Does it matter
eating
more for people who have issues with blood sugar and things like that.
It would, but what I would recommend is that you never eat carbs by themselves because regardless of if they're a complex carb or not, it's going to spike your blood sugar. So like one of the funny ways that I think to remember it is you put clothes on your carbohydrates. So there should be some fat and there should be some protein along with those. Yes, great question though.
You said never eat carbohydrates by themselves.
Right.
You have a big fruits.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
Snack or-
You could, but I would maybe like if you did like an apple, put some peanut butter or almond butter with it. I wouldn't eat it by itself if you have blood sugar issues. And really, in general, I would try to eat other nutrients along with the carbohydrate. Okay, so any other questions though? These are great. Before we go on to processed and ultra processed foods. So again, everything I've talked about so far has been healthy options. Processed does not necessarily mean unhealthy. What processed means is that when you flip the package over and you look at those ingredients, you recognize every single one of them, and you could go through the grocery store and buy those ingredients and recreate that product at home if you wanted to. But let's all be honest, there's a lot of things that it's just so much easier to just buy. So a lot of things that we eat that are healthy can be processed. They're coming in a package. There's a lot of like healthy granolas that are processed, but you recognize every single thing that is in them. Even like canned beans or frozen vegetables, anything that goes through a processing plant is processed. It's just a matter of what is mixed in with them. So good rule of thumb is it's perfectly fine to add processed into your diet. So even like canned tuna would be a processed food, but that's a good source of protein. So you could definitely add that in. I was looking though the other day when we were in the grocery store, my daughter wanted the ranch tuna. So I flipped the package over, of course, and looked at it, and it had a whole list of other things in it that you don't recognize. But I don't stop her from eating things that she wants to eat. I'm definitely reasonable. It's a matter of what she does the majority of the time. Ultra processed foods is what I would recommend that we stay away from the majority, if not all of the time. But being realistic, if you want to go out for donuts with the family every once in a while, or you guys want to go have ice cream and celebrate, it's about what you do consistently the majority of the time. But ultra processed foods are something you could not recreate in your kitchen. So you flip it over, you look at the ingredients, you probably recognize those top few, and then it goes on and on and on, and you have no idea what any of those are. The other day we were in the grocery store and I was looking at a few different children's cereals, and it is amazing what they put in those. Like you recognize the first three ingredients, and then it goes into a whole bunch of yellow, red, blue, BHT, BPA, like all of these different things that you would never put in your mouth if it was sat right in front of you. So those are the things for health purposes that we want to stay away from as much as possible. I notice it the most in any type of like frozen microwavable meals. So good thing TV dinners, I don't think that's like as big of a thing as it was whenever I was growing up. A lot of your breads, your protein bars, again, will be heavy in probably ingredients that you don't recognize. A lot of like cookies, donuts, especially cereals, like I said, is something that I've noticed are like really heavy in different ingredients that you couldn't even buy in the grocery store if you wanted to buy it. Any questions on those?
Any mayonnaise is good, like avocado mayonnaise.
I prefer avocado mayonnaise over regular mayonnaise just because of the,
Like to make tuna salad or something.
yeah, and the avocado mayonnaise is actually great. We've switched over to it. Costco has a great deal on avocado mayonnaise. In fact, if you guys watch my posts, I shop at Costco all the time. They have a lot of great options, a lot of great organic options, and a lot of great healthy options in bulk. So it makes it a little bit easier. And
Super easy to make at home. Avocado mayonnaise is super easy to make.
yes, I used to make mayonnaise at home a long, long time ago, and I lost the recipe and I can't find it now, but it was amazing. Okay. Before we get into the details of the challenge and how getting the right and appropriate portions of each one of these nutrients are, I just want to touch on why it's so important that you eat enough throughout the day. So ultimately, our bodies are built to survive at all costs. In fact, we have more genes that allow us to adapt to starvation than allowing us to adapt to overeating. So what that means, our body has an intake of calories that are required to keep us alive. So your basal metabolic rate is the lowest intake of calories that your body can take in to keep your heart beating, keep your blood pumping, just keep you alive, laying at rest, doing absolutely nothing. But what happens when we start cutting calories and we cut too low, the body starts cutting that basal metabolic rate because it will adapt and it will survive at all costs. What it also does is shut down non-essential functions for life. So it starts creating hormone issues, weight loss issues. Like if you've ever tried a diet and it worked really good the first time, and then you come back later on when you've gained some weight back and you try that same diet again, most likely what happened is the basal metabolic rate dropped. And so now cutting calories the same way you did before doesn't work the same way because that basal metabolic rate is lower. But then other functions like fertility, both male and female, those are not essential for you to survive. So the body starts shutting those things down. Hair growth, we could experience hair loss, energy production. So just your day-to-day energy, and brain fog is another big one whenever you are cutting calories and not getting the right nutrients. So just something to keep in mind, especially hormone function. I think we see it's a lot now after so many fad diets, a lot of females that are having hormone issues. Any questions on the body and the basal metabolic rate?
I'd like to go back to processed food one moment.
Okay.
Any type of spray that you would use, and to cook things to just
Like an avocado oil spray or non-stick spray?
One that's better than others.
Yes, so I would definitely go towards olive oil or avocado oil. I would stay away from any of like the canola or vegetable oil sprays. Those are not necessarily healthy fats, so I would stay away from those. And a lot of them may not even be fats in general.
Just back to reading the ingredients, basically.
Yes, so like Pam, I would stay away from that product. I probably shouldn't say that on camera. Pam will come after me and sue me. All right, okay, let's go on to the details of the challenge. So let's just go through everything that the challenge will consist of. So to start with, it will go for 4 weeks. We'll start tomorrow and we'll run through May 15th as our last day. There will be a male and a female grand prize winner. I see a lot of females in the room, so we may just have a female grand prize winner unless we have somebody signed up. But it will be the biggest body transformation at the end of the challenge. The way we're going to track that is each of you that signs up, you will receive an invitation from me into an app where you will get daily reminders about your food intake, about the habits that we're going to track. That'll be the place that you'll put in your before pictures, and then when we're done, you'll put in your after pictures. We're going to do a couple quick measurements that I will guide you through and send you instructions on how to do. It's just going to be chest, waist, and hips. Super simple. You can message me directly through the app, so you have access to me on a regular basis. But on top of that, we also have a Facebook group where we'll have community to support each other, regular nutrition education, and then just a place where we'll motivate each other and share our wins and obstacles so that we can help to work through those together. I find that if one person is having an obstacle, it's probably occurring more than once, and it will help somebody else if we work through it as a group. Okay, now the important stuff. Let's talk about what it is we're tracking even and what this is going to look like. So we're going to use something that is called a plate method. I find that this is extremely simple with clients. You don't have to weigh and measure anything. It's really like eyeballing and looking at the measurements, but it gets you really familiar with where your protein's coming from, where your carbohydrates, and where your fats are coming from, and which foods are associated with each of those. One thing I am going to show you and you'll have access to is also how to measure with your hand, because like say for instance, my husband and I are doing the challenge and we're eating off the same exact plate every night. If we fill in our portions exactly the same, either one of us is under eating or one of us is overeating. So that's not really going to be beneficial for one of us. So protein, essentially, this is what your plate will look like. But what we're going to think about is protein being about the end of the palm all the way down to that first knuckle. So that should give you an appropriate amount of protein for your body. So like for me, being a smaller female, this gives me about 4 ounces of protein per meal, which would probably give me close to 30 grams of protein, which would put me right at, if I eat 3 meals, which we should be eating at least 3 meals a day. Ideally, you can definitely eat 2 meals if you want to. You would just really need to increase your portion sizes on those 2 meals. But again, the size of your hand should give you the amount of protein you need for your body size. And then fats, remember that portion size looks a little smaller. It's only because fat is more dense, but I recommend 2 thumb-sized servings of fat in each meal. That's going to give you a couple tablespoons of oil, or if you're using like nuts and seeds, I just cover the palm there. I wouldn't think about thumb-sized servings, but it would just be like a flat palm. Carbohydrates is going to be a fist size. So if you're having potatoes, you're having rice, quinoa, it should be about a fist-sized serving, which will fill in that last little portion of the left-hand side of the plate. And then your right-hand side is all volume in green vegetables. So any kind of green vegetable, that could be leafy greens, it could be broccoli, spinach, it could be asparagus, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, zucchini, squash, you name it, cauliflower, any green vegetable you want to fill in. And it doesn't have to be the same green vegetable. Get a lot of variety in there. Questions so far? Seem easy enough? Or does that seem daunting?
The hardest thing for me is just making sure that fat usage while cooking the protein is the only fat that is incorporated into
Yes,
the meal.
so that actually brings up a really good point, is if you are incorporating fat somewhere else in the meal, you may not have a separate serving of fat. So like for instance, when I mentioned grass-fed ground beef, that could be your fat that is in that meal rather than adding something additional. So that's a really good point. The other thing, if you wanted to do like a huge salad, everything doesn't have to be separated like it is here on the plate. It's really more of like just knowing where those are coming from. So you could do a huge plate of leafy greens, cover that with some type of protein of your choice. And then your fat could come from avocados, nuts and seeds, or like an olive oil and vinegar dressing on top. And then your carbohydrates may be something separate, or maybe something you like in your salad if you like rice or quinoa. Fruit is definitely a good choice to go in your salad. So this will be posted in our Facebook group, so you'll have access to it along with the hand measurements. Then we have a couple other habits that we are going to track as well that affect our health overall. And these are equally important. It's just nutrition is what we do every day, all day. We come in here to the gym, but we eat all day long, if that makes sense. So you can knock out 45 minutes in the gym, but then we have the rest of the day of making sure our nutrition is on track for our goals. Sleep, I would put up right up there with nutrition as being equally as important. That is the time when our body repairs itself. So you want to make sure we're getting 7+ hours of sleep, quality sleep a night. I saw that face.
Oh.
So we'll be posting some things in the Facebook group that pertains to sleep. But one, if you're not getting 7+ hours a night, I would recommend, if you can, extend the alarm out longer to get more sleep. I know that it all depends on schedules, and I know some have really hard schedules and have small children that your sleep schedule also relies on. The other thing is, if you can move your bedtime up and like say go to bed 30 minutes earlier. Another thing that I do is create like a bedtime routine. So like for our kids, we create bedtime routines. So I'll stop looking at my screen 30 minutes to an hour before bed, because there is research that shows that that makes it hard for the mind to shut down. It stimulates you. So if you're laying in bed scrolling through social media before bedtime, it may make it hard for you to fall asleep. Hydration is another thing that we are going to track. So we should be getting about half our body weight in ounces of water a day. So if you weigh 200 pounds, you should be getting 100 ounces of water a day. It's really important because water is involved in every chemical reaction that takes place in our body. It also aids in detoxification. So you want to make sure that we're staying hydrated, and also movement. So being here in the gym, getting your workouts in, like we talked about, maintaining muscle mass is really important as we age because it becomes more difficult to build muscle as we get older if we start losing it. The other thing is continuing to move when you're outside of the gym. So ideally, what I recommend is that you get on average 10,000 steps a day because we are not built to sit. We are built to be up and moving. So like for me, for instance, I have a desk job. So I come in, I work out, I go home and I have meetings where I'm sitting most of the time. So I'll get up in between meetings. If it's a very short period of time, I'll walk a couple laps on the inside of the house. If I have a good stretch in between meetings, I'll go for a 10 to 20 minute walk outside. Sometimes I drag the dog along or he drags me along, but we get the movement in. Questions on any of those? So I think I mentioned before, but the app will actually give you reminders to track these and to keep moving through these habits each day. Yes.
Actually, a question. Do you think you can overdrink water?
You could overdrink water, yes. It has been done before. I think there was like a famous radio contest that they put out one time to like have someone drink as much water as possible and they actually died from it. So if you deplete your sodium, that's dangerous. But if you're sticking to like half your body weight in ounces, that's not going to be dangerous. And you could actually add in an electrolyte mix if you are concerned about that as well. Great question though. I think that in general as a population, we don't get enough water, so it's probably pretty rare that that happens. Okay, one last thing that I have to address at the end is alcohol. I know you guys did a 21-day sugar and alcohol detox earlier in the year, and there's a good reason for that. Both of those cause a lot of inflammation, and alcohol, like we talked about our body surviving at all costs, alcohol is actually a poison in the body. So it slows the metabolism down because it takes precedence. It has to be metabolized first. So the body recognizes it as a poison and it wants to get that out of the body. So whatever's sitting in the stomach is going to stay there until the body metabolizes alcohol and gets that out. So we want to sustain from alcohol as much as possible. My first recommendation would be go the 4 weeks without it. If that's not possible, I would say at most 1 to 2 drinks a week. And that means when you're mixing your drinks, so like liquor would be 1 to 2 shots a week, not 4 shots in one drink. And same with wine. Wine is actually a 5-ounce pour, which is not all that much wine. So if you're filling your glass to the top, that might be 4 drinks. Just to note, beer is a little bit easier because it comes in a bottle unless you're buying it from like Nofo and the growlers. That doesn't equal 1 drink. That's multiple. All right, I think that's everything. Any questions? Yes.
So, for the challenge, obviously we're all going to have different goals. When are you going to get with us to say, okay, I should be having this many grams of protein, she should be having a different number? What is that number?
So it'll be based off of, I mean, really all of us should be getting a gram of protein per pound of body weight. So it's going to be about portion sizes through the challenge, which in turn, depending on how you've been eating before, should promote weight loss if that is your goal, but getting the right amount of nutrients. So most of the time, if we're not losing weight, well, there could be a lot of reasons why, but we can definitely address that as we go through. But the challenge is really designed more to create healthy habits and get an understanding of where each of your nutrients are coming from, which I think is a good base for getting into weight loss.
So with eating 1 gram of protein per body weight, that's to maintain body weight. So if you're losing body weight,
Yes.
you want to get to your goal, it's your goal weight that you're eating 1 gram, right?
Absolutely, that is correct. So yes, whatever you weigh, if that is not your goal weight, you would eat your protein based off of your goal weight.
So you think your goal weight and then you did,
Right,
so you want to weigh 150, so you have protein for that.
150 grams of protein, if that's what you want to weigh. Yes, yep. 1 for 1.
Yes. For me, it's very hard for getting maximum protein. So 2 meals a day, usually, sometimes 3. So that's been the hardest thing for me is getting my weight in protein. So I try to at least incorporate a shake or something.
Yeah, I find with most vegetarians that we have to add in like a pea protein shake of some sort to get the appropriate amount of protein for your body without overdoing carbohydrates. Because that is the hardest thing.
Yes. For me, I definitely have too many carbs for sure.
Yes.
And also eating all day long. So a shake definitely helps get that protein that I need.
I think that's important for sure.
So sugar, we don't track sugar.
No, we're not tracking sugar. The focus, though, is around getting your carbohydrates from healthy sources, but also understanding, like we talked about ultra processed foods, if you are adding an ultra processed food in that has added sugars in it, knowing that that's most likely your carbohydrate in that meal, it's recognizing where they come from. So, like, for instance, let's just say, like, you went out to dinner and or out to breakfast and you had donuts. Maybe not a great example, but you have something that's ultra processed. You know that's where your carbohydrates are coming from, so then you wouldn't add oatmeal on top of that or grits on top of that, if that makes sense. So again, just going back to whatever your goals are, you could definitely lose weight eating ultra processed foods. It's just not necessarily the healthiest way to do it. And this is really designed more to figure out where your nutrients are coming from and understanding your portion sizes, which should, in the long run, lead you into better health. And even weight loss, depending on how you've been eating previously.
The point is to eat as little processed food as possible.
Yes, exactly.
What about vitamins? Do you think we should take some vitamins?
My first reaction to any kind of supplements is that we get the diet right first, and then we add in vitamins later. I don't think it's bad to take a multivitamin at all. In fact, I mean, most of the time we're not getting enough nutrients in our diet, so it's not a bad idea to take a multivitamin. But as far as like all other supplements, like vitamin D, fish oil, things like that, I would get the diet right first and then add those things in. Plus also, I mean, there's so many supplements out there, it's not a bad idea to have blood work done to understand what your body needs.
The question is probably not making noise, but if I have terrible leg cramps,
Mm-hmm. Probably potassium and magnesium, most likely. Yes.
Sources you use to detect potassium.
So bananas and then green vegetables are a great source of potassium. So I would up the green vegetables. Magnesium is actually a supplement that you could take. You're not going to overdose on magnesium. You will know when you took too much because you'll have diarrhea. So you know to cut it back when you get to that point. Otherwise, you're not going to overdose. But that may help with leg cramping also.
This focus challenge,
Yes.
how many calories do you track? But we just focusing on positive healthy habits and eating more customs and portion sizes rather than calorie deficit or less.
Yeah, the main thing is just healthy habits, and we're tracking getting the appropriate amount of protein, carbohydrates, and fats in the diet. If you are interested in one-on-one coaching, we can dive further into weighing and measuring and tracking calories if that's something that you're looking more for. This challenge is really geared more towards creating healthy habits, understanding where each of the sources come from, because I do think that that's a base in before we even start into like tracking macronutrients, is understanding what they are.
So on your plate diagram, you have your protein, your fat, and your carbs. The portion of carbs, how many grams does that represent?
So that depends on each individual. Ideally, again, just going back to carbs, we're doing a fist size. If you are extremely active, then that would be something that I would definitely want to recommend higher carbohydrates on. So just like any of the nutrients, if you overeat them, the body is going to store those extra nutrients, most likely as body fat. So you have to make sure your activity matches the level of what you're taking in. So for most commonly, like a fist size is going to be enough if you are active throughout the day. But like if you're an athlete and you're doing double workouts or you have like really long practices, then we may need to talk about increasing carbohydrates. So that's a great question too. Yes.
If our veggies are our carbohydrates, is the portion still going to be the fist size?
No, I mean the veggies side is going to be like your green vegetables. So if you're counting carbohydrates as a veggie, then yes, that's going to be just that fist size.
So fist size of spinach.
No. No, you can eat as much spinach as you want. The chances of you overeating spinach and broccoli are pretty slim, so have at it. That's like your volume.
Right, so that fist size of carbohydrates is for your carb sources other than your vegetables.
Yes. So like, again, if you're counting a potato as a vegetable, which essentially it is a vegetable, but because it is starchy, we're going to count that as a carbohydrate. Yeah, all your green veggies, those are kind of like freebie items. You just fill the plate in for volume. It'll keep you full. Plus also, like I said, you're getting micronutrients from that. So it's important to get a variety of green vegetables in the diet. You sure? You can ask all the questions.
Does it matter how you take in the green veggies? Like, for instance, I hate vegetables.
Okay.
And so one of the ways I take in, like, spinach is I'll put it in a shake and blend it up.
Yeah.
Does that affect?
So that's perfectly fine. You're still getting spinach. And it's all of it. So where like juicing, you're missing out on the fibers. You can juice, but you don't get the full benefits of the vegetable. Yes.
What about collagen peptides?
That is a protein. A lot of people like to mix that in their coffee or in their shakes to get some extra protein. So that's perfectly fine. Anything else? I love all the questions. Evan's thinking something back there. I can see it brewing. Yes.
What about specific times you should be eating?
For this challenge, there's no specific times. It's really just getting 3 meals in a day and getting the right amount of each of the nutrients. But great question. Again, with like one-on-one coaching, if your goal is more in like performance, then we would get into nutrient timing. Otherwise, it's really not a big deal. All right. If we don't have anything else, that is the nutrition seminar and the challenge.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. Thank you guys for letting me take up your time to talk about what I love talking about. So